I have no respect for Joe Rogan. I'm going to do my best to take an honest look at his special, but a big part of my issue with him is that he and his fans do not participate in public discourse in good faith, and I'll show you what I mean. Joe Rogan undeniably has the power to influence people. He's decided to step out of his very safe and extremely lucrative podcast space to deliver a comedy special. That takes guts. Let's see what he's got to say and how he's choosing to wield his power. First, as always, I want to say thanks to these boat burners who support the channel via Patreon. Now, I say it every time, but it means a lot to me, as it does to all small-time creators like myself. If you like what I'm doing here, I'd love to have you on board. Joe Rogan's new special, Burn the Boats, is on Netflix. Link below. Watch the special there before I ruin the jokes for you by talking about them. Rogan comes on stage to maybe the most hype I've ever seen at the outset of a comedy special. Any performer, regardless of politics, who is watching this reception has to think to themselves, holy shit. Sometimes we get lucky with a warm crowd. This crowd is stellar plasma. As long as Rogan delivers material in the same universe as his typical perspective, he's gonna crush in the room. Straight up front, Rogan's got a tag where he addresses the fact that he's known for misinformation.
That might be misinformation. Don't say you heard it from me, because I am known for that shit.
Now, if I were writing jokes for him, that's exactly what I would advise him to do. Go out there, right up top, and own the fact that you often run your mouth without giving a shit where it runs to. I didn't think that he was really capable of that kind of self-awareness. It's commendable in a sense, kinda, but to accept millions and millions of dollars and see the influence you have on the crowd, and then to say, well, I guess I really just say whatever, and that's okay with you? On the surface, I guess we're meant to think, Rogan, that lovable scamp, he just says whatever. But when you see this adulation and you know how much money he makes saying things that might have indirectly helped to get people hurt, plus the whole dodgy supplement sales angle, that no longer feels like lovable scamp territory to me. In fact, it starts to seem like Alex Jones type shit. But that's not Rogan's thing, right? He's not an Alex Jones guy.
Alex Jones taught me about this shit 20 years ago.
He acts like he doesn't, but it seems that Rogan very much understands where his mouth runs to. Money. It runs to money. This is that lack of good faith I talked about up top. I say wrong things, I get fame and money for saying them, but if someone believes me, oopsie, I'm just some dumb guy. After this amuse-bouche of money horniness, we go back to garden variety stand-up. Rogan reminds us that he hosted Fear Factor.
I used to host Fear Factor.
He reminds us it was gross. He's not really digging deep in terms of observations, but nobody expects Rogan to be too incisive. About 8 minutes in, Rogan leans into his anti-vax shtick.
We lost a lot of people during COVID, and most of them are still alive.
My friend Dr. Lockwood, a hilarious comedian, improviser, and physician, was treating his patients in rural Georgia when COVID started. A few days later, he got sick, and he went into the hospital. When he did, he said to his husband, "If I'm not out in 3 days, I'm not coming out." He didn't come out. He's not still alive. Here's the problem with Rogan. He is good at doing stand-up comedy. The previous 8 minutes of stand-up have been material that would work in any room. It's not breaking any ground, but if an unknown did this material with this delivery, in my opinion, they would probably have a career, especially if they were a straight white male and managed to wiggle into Rogan's cohort. But Rogan, for some reason, won't allow himself to just be a person who's good at comedy. He has to have that, plus all the money and slavish devotion that comes from being a misinformation peddler who is good at comedy. Otherwise, he would stop peddling the misinformation. This is why Spotify pays him so much, because he's relatively decent at comedy, but absolutely shameless when it comes to mining that vein of comedy profiteering. I'll get more into that in a second. From here, we get into some pretty standard drug stuff and jerking off jokes. Now, if you were making fun of a road comics material, you would maybe point out how they all do jokes about the TSA touching them. But Rogan doesn't let that stop him doing that very section with a little sprinkle of trans and homophobia.
It's our government solution to a complex problem, which is, how do you touch dicks and not be gay?
Then about halfway through, Rogan starts talking about how great Alex Jones is and how Jones helped him understand how to be a transphobe.
Alex Jones taught me about this shit 20 years ago. Listen, he's right about a lot of things. He was wrong about that one thing, though. But he's right. He's right. That one thing was a big one. But he's right. That one thing was huge. But he's often correct.
And if you're not familiar with how big of a piece of shit Jones is, I can recommend the HBO documentary, The Truth versus Alex Jones, as well as the excellent podcast, Knowledge Fight. I admire Dan and Jordan's work on Knowledge Fight so much, it inspired me to start this channel. I honestly thought that Rogan kind of tried to keep Jones at arm's length because of how deeply Jones's empire and wealth are in jeopardy thanks to his lies and conspiracy profiteering. But if Rogan's willing to name check him on stage like this, that was apparently incorrect. Alex Jones wasn't wrong about Sandy Hook. He lied because it made him millions. The difference between those things is so glaring that in order to confuse them, you have to become a liar too. I don't think that a comedian's onstage persona is the same as themselves, the person. And we can see that in the difference between the way that Rogan is performing here and the way that he talks on his podcasts. And I'm not saying that all jokes have to be entirely factual either. But I do think that what you say as a comedian matters, especially if you accept money for it. To bring up Jones in this way is to legitimize what he did and what he continues to do. Why would Rogan want to do that? Does he think that the Alex Jones contingent of his audience is big enough that he needs to pay them fan service? I honestly thought that the power dynamic was tilted in the other direction. Here we come to an important moment. Rogan tells us in clear terms how he justifies how much money he has made from peddling misinformation. This is undeniably how he's able to sleep at night.
But here's my take on that, sincerely. If you're getting your vaccine advice from me, is that really my fault?
In a word, yes, it's your fault when you profit from lying. And the courts agree, which is why Jones owes over $1 billion to the families whom he preyed on for money. But if Rogan and Jones are in the same game, why does that game even make money? And I'm not sure that anyone knows for sure. I believe that Jones and Rogan were both in the right place at the right time to tap into a rich vein of people who needed something, anything, to believe in. A lot of people look at the statistics of declining church attendance and think, okay, well, people must be focusing more on science and reason. I don't think so. I think the need to believe in something, even if, and maybe even especially if, it defies logic, is a powerful motivator for some people. Maybe, for whatever reason, those people are drifting away from Christianity, but I don't think that they're becoming enlightened centrists. I think a lot of those people moved to QAnon and Rogan and Jones and Trump. That stuff scratches that itch of having a belief system that is somehow elevated from everyone else, but you don't have to actually go to church. I think one of Rogan's offerings to his audience is a way to feel smarter and more informed than people around them without taking the time or observing the ethical guardrails of traditional study. And he also offers them an escape hatch. If anyone calls you on being wrong about the shit that you confidently spout without knowing what you're talking about, you can just say, what? You listen to me? Lol, I'm dumb. In addition to COVID in general pushing stand-up comedy to the right, as I've spoken about before, Rogan has rewritten what it means to be a stand-up comic with this. I call it comedy profiteering. You flirt with racism and homophobia, transphobia, conspiracy garbage, fascism, because it plays well for the algorithm. And if anyone calls you on it, you say, but I'm a dum-dum. This has worked so well that Rogan is in a lot of ways the king of stand-up. Being on his podcast can launch a comic or unfunny grifter from nothing. And for this reason, for the most part, the white male comedy space does not question or parody Joe Rogan. In fact, they're all clamoring to follow his example in hopes that he will see them and elevate them. Shout out to guys like Heidecker and Cross et al. For being exceptions.
Look up on the computer how many drummers. Okay.
At around 40 minutes, Rogan lapses into the typical complaints of being taken out of context. We could just as easily be watching Gervais or anyone else droning on about this.
First of all, it's not true, but if you want to take me out of context, I give you a lot to work with, you know? That's not my job, kids. I'm a professional shit talker, okay? Some of the things I say make sense, a lot of them don't. It's up to you to figure out what's what. That's the fun part.
Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't suck to be taken out of context, but it's hard to feel the injustice on behalf of someone absolutely printing money for talking and taking no responsibility for what they say. I mean, which is it, buddy? Are you a serious guy whose every nuance must be respected in order to understand the full galaxy of your meaning? Or are you just some dumb ape grunting indiscriminately? There are only two options here, and you hate it when people have more than two options, right? After that, there's a section reminiscent of Gervais's latest special where Rogan wonders aloud about saying the N-word and then actually says some other words. Now, Gervais's big tiresome reveal at the end of his chunk was that he says,
"So you knew I was joking? That'd be fucking retarded."
So Rogan goes a bit farther by saying,
Because I'm more afraid of black people than I am retards. Duh. Yeah, don't you know how jokes work, faggot?
great work, fellas, modern day philosophers. You'd think that Rogan would be hypersensitive to making sure that all of his material was as original as possible, since he got so much early traction for taking Carlos Mencia to task for stealing jokes. But he has no problem doing extremely well-trodden material like this. I don't think he's pinching Gervais material, by the way, or anything like that. I mean, neither could really lay claim to have written material this well-trodden. I just think they're both not trying very hard, and so they land in the same threadbare lane. All in all, I'd say most of this material is serviceable stand-up comedy delivered by a guy with stand-up comedy chops. It's the comedy version of an airport bar cheeseburger. Fits the description, better than nothing, if it's what you really want, but made of low-quality ingredients. If Rogan could leave it there, he would have had a good career, and I would have nothing bad to say about it. The imagery of burn the boats is that of some invading force landing on foreign soil, so committed to their invasion that they ensure that they have no way home. But the reality of this special is it's airport cheeseburger comedy sprinkled with Rogan's tiresome misinformation party trick. And if he happens to serve as a right-wing ideology on-ramp, well, he's got a perfect excuse for himself. He's just some dumb guy saying whatever, and you shouldn't listen. And if you do, that's not his fault. He's going to cash the check, but he takes no other responsibility. I don't buy it. He's not that dumb. He just got his money and his fame by playing dumb, so he's going to play on. After all, you don't need to burn the boats if you're making millions staying on shore.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe, and maybe jump on the Patreon if you want to help me make more. And if you want to talk about comedy writing with people who are trying to do it in a constructive way, we also have a Discord channel.